to us on the air and you think, why are they?
If the city of Baltimore was a patient at a hospital, the prognosis would not be good. Once a proud city with nearly 1 million people, the population may soon fall below 600,000. The sounds of sirens fill the air as police run from murder to murder. Hundreds of people are dying on Baltimore's mean streets. The scars of neglect are evident for all to see. Crumbling roads, decaying buildings, broken homes, trash piles up in alleys and streets. The sense of hopelessness fills the air. Baltimore is a city in crisis. What can be done to save our city? Who can save our city? From Fox 45 News, this is Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. Please welcome your moderators, Kai Jackson and Mary Bubala.
Hello, I'm Kai Jackson. This is my colleague, Mary Bubala. We want to welcome you to our Fox 45, Your Voice, Your Future City in Crisis Town Hall. We are happy to be here at the Jerusalem Evangelical Lutheran Church in Northeast Baltimore, another strong, great Baltimore community with deep roots to this city, doing a lot of great things, and we're very proud to be here tonight, proud of our audience, happy to our panelists who've shown up here, and very thankful to Pastor Greg Knepp for hosting our City in Crisis Town Hall tonight.
Yes, it is our 9th town hall across Baltimore City, and we changed the format last time when we were in Waverly, and you can see we have 3 boxes up here, and we've asked people to submit questions as they've entered the church tonight, and also you can submit questions online, and those are in there, so we'll be taking questions from these 3 boxes throughout the night. We're going to get started right away by introducing our panel. We have Thuru Vignaraja, T.J. Smith, former Mayor Sheila Dixon, and of course, Reverend Al Hathaway from Union Baptist Church. Thank you all so much for participating on our panel tonight.
Yep, and as we get started, we have a statement from Governor Larry Hogan about the crime that's been taking place in Baltimore. Let's listen to that statement from Governor Larry Hogan.
We've got some bills that are supported by more than 90% of the people in Baltimore City and the state of Maryland that are going to do something about the violent crime, the shootings, and the murders here in the city. It's the #1 issue that everyone in the state and everyone in the city is concerned about. And we've done, for 40 days, we've done absolutely nothing. There was a story on the front page of the Sun today saying that funding $33 billion for Kerwin was a life or death matter. And what I said was actually stopping the shootings on the streets of Baltimore is a real life or death matter. And that's what we need to be focused on.
So Governor Hogan, critical of city leaders and some of our state leaders who represent the city being focused more on education than on crime when crime is an urgency in the city of Baltimore. Mr. Vignaraja, I'd like to start with you. What do you do? How do you balance that between the urgency of crime in Baltimore City? Does that outweigh the need to focus on the Kerwin plan?
Look, we have to be able as a city to walk and chew gum. We have to be able to recognize the importance of all of these priorities. But Governor Hogan, like so many people, are frustrated that no one is appreciating that crime and corruption are the defining narratives of our city locally and nationally. That's what they hear. They hear about the 350 homicides. They hear about the spike in carjackings. And we can have plans, as our campaign does, on public transit, on education, on taxes. But if you don't tackle the problem of soaring murders in every neighborhood, it's hard to get any of the rest of it off the ground.
Mr. Smith, what's your reaction to the governor's statement?
Well, he's not wrong. I mean, who out here is thinking we shouldn't invest more in witness protection? Who out here is thinking we shouldn't hold violent repeat offenders more accountable? Who out here is thinking we shouldn't be investing more in doing something about the here and now violence that we're dealing with? Of course we have to invest in education, and that's something that should be a priority. But like Mr. Vignaraja said, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. While we're working on trying to figure out a Kerwin plan, we should be working every single day to stop the violence that we're seeing every single day. On my way here, there was a shooting earlier at Park Heights and Cold Spring. again. They experience it over and over at that same intersection and just a block down, Ricestown and Cold Spring. Over and over again, the same communities are continuously plagued with the violence, and we saw an indictment come out from the feds today. Carjackings is where the murders started, where a popular barber was killed last year. It's affecting so many families every day, day in and day out, and people are just airing their frustrations. But I do want to see people go behind the closed doors and have these conversations and not continue to air grievances publicly.
Ms. Dixon?
Ms. Dixon.
We have to do both. And we can do both. If you have the right kind of leadership that has the right kind of plan, that knows how to reduce crime, that knows how to go after the violent offenders, that know how to deal with the quality of life issues that impact our neighborhoods, on top of being able to deal with education issues. You know, as a mayor of a city, you have to juggle multiple things at one time. And so you have to have the kind of experience, the kind of leadership that can do both of those. I agree with the governor. I understand his frustration because we're all frustrated. In Annapolis right now, education and crime should be the two focal points of legislation and budget as it relates to state, and our legislators need to understand and hear what our citizens are saying here in Baltimore. So as mayor, as the next mayor, I will be in Annapolis. I will go down with an agenda. I will sit down with the governor, because that's what it takes. This is about a partnership in order to help to resolve these problems we face.
Reverend Hathaway, I want to ask you, we had our 44th murder in Baltimore last night. This is 12 more than the same time last year. And there have been 78 non-fatal shootings compared to 76 at this time last year. So we are higher in both categories. Do you think the state should be more involved in the crime fighting? Do you think that would help you as you do lots of things in our community to combat crime?
Governor Hogan in his statement, and Governor Hogan I know very well, but when he killed the Red Line, he took the hearts, the dreams, and jobs right out of the community. When he didn't move on State Center to have that done, at my church, I trained and had through training 2,500 persons out of West Baltimore that was anticipating jobs as a result of State Center. By not settling State Center, not creating those jobs, jobs is how you deal with crime. Jobs is how you deal with violence. You create jobs, violence goes down.
All right, we're going to look at a graphic on one of our monitors. If you can see it, this was from our Gonzalez poll. It was a mayoral poll. It says confidence in elected officials.
That's right. And as you can see, 18% are saying they have confidence, 75%, the overwhelming majority, is saying they do not have confidence. Mr. Smith, I want to get back to you on something really quickly about crime. You mentioned the federal indictment today. Let's be very clear about this. This federal indictment also included a group of people who are accused of shooting Sergeant Isaac Carrington out front of his home in a failed robbery attempt. This is a serious problem, but more than that, this isn't just a random act. This was a group of players who were targeting citizens in the city of Baltimore. How would you stop that kind of crime?
Well, that's what we do, and that's what we have to talk about when we talk about legislative priorities, holding those specific types of people, those types of individuals who've shown their propensity towards violence. This wasn't their first crime. Again, if you read the indictment, you see that this has been a series of criminal acts that they've been involved in. We have to educate our young people so that pool of applicants that chooses to go into a life of crime is less. We have to make sure jobs are available so that pool of applicants that are going to go to a life of crime don't choose a life of crime because there's a life of opportunity. So those are things that I want to work on as mayor. We have to do it in a bipartisan way because it's not all about Democrats or Republicans. We have to work with whoever's in charge of the state, and we don't know how that's going to shake out in the future. So we have to work with the state in order to make sure we push forward with those agendas in order to reduce the violence. It's multifaceted.
All right. Mr. Vignaraggi, you want to?
Yeah, you know, TJ and I, of course, agree. I bet everybody on this stage agrees. I bet everybody in this room agrees that we have to focus on violent repeat offenders, that we have to invest in our children, that we have to create more jobs. We all agree about that. The question that has to define this election is how. Who has the concrete ideas and the record to get it done? Carjackings and killings are absolutely related. One of the reasons why we have advocated for an expanded ground camera network and the aerial surveillance program to focus on carjacking and killings when nobody else was talking about it is because those are the kinds of concrete things that actually change the dynamic. I served as a federal prosecutor. Federal prosecutors have automatic jurisdiction over carjackings, over bank and commercial robberies, over gun cases. That's why we've called for automatic federal review of those cases in Baltimore City. The concrete details matter. The platitudes, the sound bites, they're not going to reduce the crime.
Okay. Question on crime. Ms. Dixon, if elected, how would you, this is from one of our viewers, how would you improve the quality of life in Baltimore if elected?
How would I improve the quality of life if I was elected? You've got to take a holistic approach. First of all, I was the first mayor in 30 years that was able to reduce crime in a city during a time when the city was economically and financially challenged. So we have to go after the most violent offenders. But let's talk about some other things that we keep wanting to put it all on just police. We can't arrest our way out of this. Yes, we have to have jobs. We have to have training. But we have to make sure that our state's attorneys, that our courts, parole and probation, all of our public safety entities have to be at the table doing their jobs. It's not just one over the other. And that's not happening. We have the state saying one thing, we have the city saying something else, we have the state's attorney. That's not going to work. We're not going to fix it. And so as mayor, I will bring everybody together, sit them at the table and say, we have to do this together in order to create the kind of city that I know we have.
All right, we have a graphic we want the audience to take a look at. This is our Fox 45 News Gonzalez poll. How much trust and confidence do you have in Baltimore politicians? 77% of respondents are saying they don't, and 17% are saying that they do.
Reverend Hathaway, I'd like to ask you, we've heard from all the candidates on stage tonight say, we need jobs. You've even said it. What type of jobs do you think we can get here in Baltimore? What companies can we attract to Baltimore? And what do the people that you interact with on a daily basis, what kind of jobs are they willing to work and that they're trained for?
I think when you also look at that statistic, you're talking about trust, you should also look at the statistic and poll of people who have faith in our public school system. When we talked to 2,000 people, it was 81% that just felt as though our school system was not connecting people to jobs. Give you an example. I had a conversation with a gentleman in the heating, air conditioning business. He said right now, we have 6,500 openings in HAVC. 6,500 openings.
And it's good money.
Oh, good money. Not only that, I talked to a sheet metal fabricator. He has 1,000 openings. I think our disconnect between our schools and jobs is showing that's what's causing the problem in our city.
All right. I have another question now about crime and or corruption in the city of Baltimore. Mr. Vignarajah, this is going to be for you. The question comes in, no one wants to believe that the two crime-fighting agencies, and they're talking about the Baltimore Police Department and State's Attorney's Office, sometimes, that's in this person's opinion, help violent offenders catch a break, and we know this. And I think they must mean with plea deals in the State Attorney's Office. How the State Attorney's Office is supposed to be an independent office, but what would you do about this problem that some say exists, obviously?
Look, there's no question we have to be better, and there's no question we have to be more transparent about this. Right now, no one is telling you that 40% of circuit court felony cases are being dropped on average 6 months after they were indicted. No one is telling you that the overwhelming majority of the cases that remain are being pled out to nickel and dime, slap on the wrist sentences. No one is telling you that in a year where 1,000 cases went to trial, there were only 175 trial convictions. Why are you hearing that from me for the first time? Why hasn't our City Hall, our city leaders, the people that you've elected to do it, they're not here to answer your questions, and now you know why.
Mr. Smith, I'd like to ask you, we have an audience question. Somebody wrote this just tonight. What action would you take day one in office under current laws that are in place to impact the day-to-day crime that occurs in our city? Drug sales, kids not in school, curfew, loitering, etc.
Day one, the police commissioner is coming in with me, and we're going specifically to the communities that once again see the rapid open-air drug markets on the corner where people are constantly calling the police, constantly talking to me, sending me inbox messages saying, we want something done about these folks hanging on the corner.
But the consent decree
The consent decree
comes
does
into
not
play.
say that you can't do it. This is the misunderstanding
Yes.
about the consent decree. If people are out there for no lawful purpose, dealing drugs, getting involved in violence, they can be moved off the corner. You can do it in a legal and lawful way, and they have to constitutionally police. Training, training, training.
All right. Question that came in again from our audience. I'm going to let this be for you, Pastor Hathaway. How are you going to unite communities to combat the lack of opportunities that lead to crime?
That is a good question. The way you unite people is that you unite them from understanding that they have shared values. Shared values mean that we want a city that is a good city. We want a city where government is accountable. We want a city where government is credible. We want a city where government is transparent. Unite people around shared values. And when we do that, people are saying to me that the current people that are there, they need to be gone. And we need a new set of people who are willing to work in those shared values.
Next question from our audience, Ms. Dixon, I'll ask you, what policies do you believe led to the current crime problem and how do you fix them? So policies.
The policies, what I believe happened is that when you create a system that's beginning to work, and this is a problem that we have in city government, when you have a system that's beginning to work, where you're focusing on the most violent offenders, where you have all of your criminal justice entities working together from the bottom up, when you have your cleaning up the city, where you're greening up the city, where you're dealing with vacant properties, where you're creating job opportunities, when you're dealing with systemic issues, when you have that all at work and you have accountability and you're tracking this, and then the next person comes along and well, that's not my idea, let me just throw it away. We need consistency. We need consistency with results, and we are getting that.
Please go ahead, Mr. Vignaraja.
I want to respond to something that Reverend Hathaway said and something that Ms. Dixon said. You know, Reverend Hathaway said something about shared values. One of the values that we all share is to make sure that the people that are returning to prison have the opportunities that they need, right? It's unacceptable that 73% of the people that return to Baltimore are rearrested within 3 years, right? But it's not good enough just to say we all agree about that. What are we going to do about it? One thing that we have pledged to do, we're the only campaign that's pledged to do this, is to lift away the government debt from the individuals that are returning, that make them suspend their driver's licenses and take away 2/3 of their wages. That's not a rational choice for a person to go back to drug dealing when you're suspending their driver's license and taking away 2/3 of their money. We got to do that.
All right, hold on 1 second. I have a little statement for the audience. Audience members, if you can squeeze in together, we have some people who we kind of need to be able to sit down. If you can do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Anyone who can offer a seat to someone, please do so. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, this is a crime question for you. Mr. Vignaraja, you just talked about the recidivism rate, which continues to be a problem, not just obviously in Maryland and Baltimore, but across the country. This is a question for you, Mr. Smith. What programs will you implement, and this is keeping in line with talking about the recidivism rate perhaps to stop it, what programs will you implement for the youth committing these petty crimes? Are you willing to do gun buyback programs as an incentive? Does that even work?
Gun buyback programs get guns out of houses. It's not going to be a lot of bad guys going to turn their guns in to get a gift card. But to get the gun out of the house, if people want to get a gun out of the house and we can incentivize it, it's a good thing to do. We need a robust youth opportunities program for youth who aren't connected necessarily to jobs, they aren't connected necessarily to recreation. And I'm putting forth ideas for the squeegee program. I'm the only candidate that's released a robust squeegee, a comprehensive squeegee program to get the young people off the corner. And if they want to work and learn responsibility, we'll provide the opportunity for that. There has to be a responsibility involved there.
Okay, here's another reaction to our mayoral poll. The direction of Baltimore City. Do you agree that it's going in the right direction? Only 19% say yes, 75% say no. We are now going to take time to focus on other issues in our city, including corruption and education. And I have this very thoughtful and sort of long question, but I'm going to say it. Our neighborhoods, and our streets reflect how Baltimore feels about itself. The trash is just unimaginable. Walking, driving, living in Baltimore is to see trash being thrown out of car windows or just dropping it on the ground. It is horrible how Baltimore treats itself by trashing their city, the community, the neighborhoods. What is being done to clean up the city, not only of corruption, but the actual littering and trash? We'll start with Ms. Dixon.
Trash, I was on the trash truck when I ran the first time and went out with the sanitation workers. Trash is a people's problem, and we have to be in the lead, the city government, to show people that, one, we're going to do our part and role when we pick up trash on a daily basis, but we also have to get our citizens to be engaged, involved. And it's a collective effort. Everybody in their block has to take on the responsibility. Yes, we need to do more in the city, because when I drive around, that's one of my pet peeves. I had to stop yelling at people when they threw trash out of their windows. But it's also a people problem that people have to begin to respect their neighborhoods. And how do we respect? By the city doing its job, by cleaning up neighborhoods, by getting rid of vacant properties in communities, and by working with communities to help them to clean up theirs.
And we also need equity. We saw the news report recently where Southwest Baltimore doesn't get the same 311 service as Southeast Baltimore. The dumping grounds that exist in Baltimore are the user-friendly dumping grounds in poor, mainly black neighborhoods. And if that was happening elsewhere, something would have been done right away. So accountability.
I hope it's okay, because we're up here with people that are people of good faith, but I want to disagree without being disagreeable. You know, Ms. Dixon had this incredible moment where she rode a trash truck, but then she was the mayor who got rid of 2 times a week trash pickup. One of the things that we have pledged to do is to bring that back. You know, Ms. Dixon tells you that crime went down on her watch, but it's important to remember that crime was already on its way before she got into office. Crime went down after she left, and she was only there for 2 years. So it's really important to remember that murders were down under O'Malley, murders went down under thing. And Ms. Dixon has done.
An example
All right,
of the debate.
Mr. Vigaraja, let her respond. Ms. Dixon. Go ahead, please respond.
First of all,
I have a lot of respect for Ms. Dixon, but we got to facts or
all
facts.
Right, but let's deal with real facts. Yes. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Let her respond.
When we went to one-day trash and one-day recycling, that was the beginning of the city getting cleaner. That's number one. I have people stop me every day and say, the city, we were out there because our sanitation workers were not only picking up the trash and the recycling, but on those off days, they were going into those problem areas and they were cleaning up those alleys. They were cleaning up that. That's number one. Number two, wait a minute, number two, we went from zero tolerance, where Martin O'Malley was locking up everybody for being on the corners, to community policing, and it was during my year of 2007. And if Stephanie Rollins-Blake had to continue on my crime plan, it would have been gone down. And right to this day, we wouldn't have 300 and some bodies that are dead in 2016. So right. I disagree.
Let's continue quickly.
Okay, thank you.
We have another new question. Thank you all both for the question and the response, Ms. Dixon. We had a young man shot. Mr. Smith, this will be for you. We had a young man shot in the daylight right next to our senior building. You all remember this. Why don't we have a drug task force walk in our area when police ride around all the time and leave us to fend for ourselves? And lastly, there are shootings every other week. What are you going to do for us here? And this is specific on West Belvedere, Mr. Smith.
I unfortunately did not hear the beginning of your question.
Oh, we had a young man shot in the daylight right next to our senior building. Okay. You remember that shooting that took place?
Well, again, this is about rallying everybody. I see Safe Streets in the house tonight, and Safe Streets was out yesterday rallying in a community where a 72-year-old woman was shot and wounded. These are things that can't be allowed, and we can't simply depend on the police department to figure the answer out to all of this. We have to step up and turn in some of these people who are running the streets recklessly in the middle of the daytime. I do support the aerial surveillance as well, because it will help with daytime shootings that take place, and these brazen criminals who don't care if they're going to get in a shootout in the middle of the day when a 73-year-old woman is going to come out and smoke a cigarette are the people who need to be held most accountable. Stop locking up drug abusers and start locking up hard criminals.
Okay. Our next question from the audience. What is your proposal to keep officials, including yourselves, accountable to the citizens of Baltimore for any in-office corruption? So what are your proposals? We'll start at the end with Mr. Vignarajah.
You know, I was the first candidate in Baltimore mayoral history to release our taxes over the past 5 years. If Catherine Pugh had released her taxes, she wouldn't be mayor. If Darrell D'Souza had released his taxes, he would never have been nominated or confirmed as police commissioner. We're sitting here about 60 days away from the election, and there's lots and lots of other candidates that have not released their taxes for the last 5 years. Let's start by doing that. I think it is disqualifying if you have not released your taxes to ask for the public trust.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
I think the first thing we should do is lead by example, and we shouldn't put ourselves or put you or put Baltimore police officers in a position by asking them to turn off their body-worn cameras. So we're going to talk about transparency. We got to keep it 100. And right now we're not keeping it 100. I'm probably the only unemployed candidate that's sitting on this stage, and I'll release my taxes not on Theroux's watch or on my watch. But I will tell you this, if I get pulled over, that camera's going to keep rolling, so you can present that young lady who was in the car with you for transparency purposes.
All right. Okay. Let's another question. Miss Dixon, this is for you. This is a question that came specifically from our online audience. This is a corruption question. The question is, how is Sheila Dixon going to gain Baltimore's trust back after her corruption in office? Trust is like a piece of paper. After you ball it up, you can never flatten it out again. Ms. Dixon, how do you respond?
First of all, I appreciate whoever gave that question. And secondly, let me say this, because Fox 45 ran a special about all the corrupted criminals. And let me say this, Fox 45 has no clue about really what happened. And I don't have the time right now, but I know I have to gain people's trust back. I've learned a lot from many experiences that I had, but I also know that I'm going to have to be as transparent as possible. I have my taxes ready to be released, but let me say this, because I asked somebody who's part of my campaign, I said, well, where is Theroux's taxes? He released them, but how can anyone get access to them? Mine will be posted on my website, and it's going through that process now. I have put my disclosure out that we had to fill out. That's public information. I know I'm going to have to gain your trust back, and I'm going to work 3 times as hard to do that. I also know about redemption and second chances, and this is an opportunity to allow people to express that. Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't do that.
I
didn't do that.
Hey, I'm good, you know.
And they heard you. Okay, another question from our audience. As a retired federal government employee for 34 years, we are reinvestigated every 5 years. Does the same apply for state and city employees? For example, the previous police commissioner and mayor were indicted for tax issues. Had he or she been reinvestigated, this would have been disclosed and handled in a timely manner. So the question really is, are there enough checks and balances, and will you put more in place if you become our next mayor? Let's start with Ms. Dixon, and we'll go down the line.
I mean, everybody that you hire at a certain level, you have to do a background check on them. You also have to sit down with them face to face to make sure you get the right information. But you have to do a background check, and we have to do that before we decide to even hire somebody. And in today's technology, it's easy to do a background check on a person. And I think that in the case of the former police commissioner. That was something that was missed, unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that whole situation is a situation of vetting where it should have come up and it should have been a new part because it's a new job that you're applying for. But it's something that should be a standard because people's lives change. As you move your way through life, 20, 30 years, your life changes. And you should want to be as transparent as possible. And it's something that I want to put in place. I've put forth an accountable government plan that includes a chief ethics officer so things like this can be run through them. So things like this can be looked at. And we have to actually do it. We can't just have it as this idea. We actually have to do it and have accountability standards and measures in place so that you can catch it. That's how GTTF happened, because no accountability from years upon years, and then it developed into the mushroom cloud.
Mr. Vignarajah.
So it's our responsibility as candidates to make sure that the public is focusing on the most important issues, and this is a great example of one. And we got to put out concrete commitments. I'm going to give you 3 concrete commitments that we're going to do on day 1. Number 1, we're going to do a top-to-bottom audit of every agency in City Hall and release the results within 100 days. You will know what I know within 100 days. Number 2, every month, we're going to have a public city stat in one of the 9 districts as well as 3 citywide, so we share with you how each and every agency is doing. And number 3, every week, we're going to have a press conference on crime so you know what's working and what is not working. That's what transparency looks like.
All right. Ms. Dixon, here's a question, and this has come up constantly about how City Hall and the City of Baltimore, but even to some degree how the state of Maryland is run in terms of deals being done. Why aren't there laws in place, correct this person if they're wrong, in place to immediately censure and punish politicians who receive funds from people or groups doing business with the city? So we're talking about Baltimore. One would think that there is a clear and evident conflict of interest for the city in that regard. Ms. Dixon, how do you want to respond to that?
Well, first of all, there are laws and policies and procedures to follow. Secondly, when someone contributes to your campaign,
yes,
they do business with the city, they are supposed to, as a business, disclose that. So we have to make sure that we have a record of that before it comes to the Board of Estimates, before a project is approved, that they have documented that and that it's public, that we can publish that information.
Does the structure need to change, Ms. Dixon, including how the Board of Estimates works?
Well, 2 things. One, the fact that businesses are not doing that, someone is not being accountable for tracking that kind of information, that business as well as city government. Does the Board of Estimates need to change? You know, there's a policy before the council right now to reduce it to three, the president, the mayor, and the comptroller. And that process could work. But if that becomes very political, then that will be holding up a lot of contracts moving forward where work needs to be done in the community. But I'm not opposed to a 3-board member.
Pastor Hathaway, are you satisfied with the way the Board of Estimates works and the way, in the opinion of a lot of citizens in the city, money changes hands between those who get campaign contributions, not just that, but also the way those who do business with the city are then given access to contracts?
It's really not what I feel as I hear the people. It's almost like the fox watching the hen house. The challenge really is, and the reason why Act Now Baltimore is gaining momentum is that we want to build the power so that the people are able to hold the political class accountable. That's really what has to happen. We got to be there at the Board of Estimates, as the late Arnold Jolivet was, be there challenging what's going on and also articulating what's going on.
Well, Ms. Dixon brought up the great point. It's checks and balances. It goes right back to what I just said. We have to do it. If the systems exist and we aren't doing it, that's all part of the whole scheme. It goes on all the time. It was a line in the wire. They said, you follow that money, you don't know where the heck you're going to end up at. And that's what happens right here in Baltimore. We follow that money, and we saw it with Councilman Ryan Dorsey recently. 42 grand. For a place that he was doing business with, then he wrote that check back. I'm going to tell you, during this whole political thing, because I'm not a politician, it's going to be hard work to write back a $42,000 check. But when it feels icky, you got to get it off your plate. But there's no clearinghouse to say this is not the way it should be done. That's why the chief ethics officer is important, to have teeth and to actually do it, not just talk about it.
And the inspector general.
And the inspector general, who's doing God's work, going after the corruption that exists within government. These two will work hand in hand under my administration.
We're going to now pivot to education. We put up another question here from our Gonzalez mayoral poll. Baltimore public school satisfaction. 83% of people who responded say no, and these are Democratic voters that we polled in the city of Baltimore. 8% say yes. So I want to start with these questions. All of you have said you support the Kirwan Commission plan for education, and we have reported, Fox 45 has reported, the cost is $30 billion over set years. Baltimore City schools right now, though, are the third highest funded in the nation per pupil. So will more money help? And how do you guarantee that that will?
You know, I think it's so important, Mary, to emphasize what you just said. We have the third highest per pupil spending in the country and the third worst results in the country. That is unacceptable. So the first thing we have to do is a top to bottom audit to find out where all that money is going, because it's not going to fix the roofs. It is not going to put heat and air conditioning. It is not going so the water is drinkable. You know, your poll, Mary, said that 8% of people are satisfied. I don't know who they are. I don't know who thinks that the schools are satisfactory in Baltimore City. My mom and dad were career educators. My mom taught at Poly. My dad taught at Edmondson and Douglas. They saw firsthand the important work that is being done, and we're not supporting them enough. We have to do more.
So, when we talk about the education that our kids are receiving, it's not from the teachers, because my mom's a teacher, my son's mom's a teacher, my cousin's a teacher, and they bust their tails trying to educate their kids. They do a great job at trying to educate their kids, but when the money's getting caught up and when the right programs are not being given to our children, the right opportunity to make them career and college ready, then that's where the problem lies. We have to look at this differently, and as we support the Kirwan program, I look at what are the outcomes and what are the opportunities to change course if we recognize these large investments aren't having an impact on the educational outcomes. That's what we have to focus on.
Ms. Dixon, has the Kirwan Commission made clear to the citizens of Maryland why it makes sense to invest $32 billion in this system and what it's going to do, the results that they would get from this?
Well, the current commission has come up with a strategy and plan to increase equity across the board with all our public educations. I support it, but
do citizens understand what it even is?
They don't understand it. And secondly, what we have to do is have more accountability. We need to have more accountability in the home. We need to have more accountability at North Avenue. And we need to have accountability in the schools. And the schools need the wraparound services and support to help them with children today differently than when you and I were in school. Because the bottom line is teachers need to be able to teach, and we need to keep quality teachers, and we need to get committed teachers and administrators, and we need psychological services for our kids and their families. We need social workers. We need community schools. The school day needs to be longer. We need to start earlier at 3 years old, but it also has to start at home.
One of the criticisms of the Kirwan plan is that it doesn't address violence in the schools, and this question comes from our audience. Children, teachers, principals, and other staff members have been attacked and harassed by some students and their families. Children have committed suicide and others skip school to avoid the violence. What is your plan to address the issue of violence and harassment? Would you be willing to include the legal system in this? So that can be a two-tiered answer. The Kirwan Commission doesn't address violence in the schools and keeping kids safe.
You know, the Kirwan Commission does not do enough to address the trauma and the violence that is unfolding in so many of these schools, period. And I think you made a very good point, which is people don't appreciate the importance of Kirwan and what it does. It does do some important things, and I think you're owed an honest answer and a clear answer from us. I fully support funding Kirwan, and we are the only campaign that's put out a plan on how you do it. We're going to legalize and tax marijuana. We're going to go after the casinos and make sure that they pay their fair share. We're going to raise taxes on abandoned property to make sure that the money is coming there to develop it. But it's also important to realize that more money does not mean and does not guarantee that the money is going to the right place, and that's where we have to start.
All right. This is a question. Education should be on the top of all candidates' lists, not crime, because if there was either a better education system, you wouldn't have this much crime. Treat Baltimore City school system, this is coming again from a viewer, or someone online, I'm sorry. Treat Baltimore City school system the same way you treat the county school system. Who wants to respond to that?
I agree with what the person's saying. We have to invest more in our schools, and I've committed to continuously raising the budget of Baltimore City Public Schools while maintaining the budget of public safety. We also have to address the here and now. Our kids are walking by crime scenes every day. We can't ignore the problems today to take care of problems in the future. We can address both. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. If we think we can only invest in root cause and down the line things, we're going to sit here and say it's okay for 300 plus of our brothers and sisters to be gunned down every day. That's unacceptable to me, and I'm not going to allow that.
And I would just add to what TJ is saying that we cannot have a good school over at Roland Park and then in Sandtown have a poor school. The same services in Roland Park have to be in Sandtown. So we have to make sure that we have equity across the board for our schools. Theroux is not the only one who's released an education plan. I've released one. It's a holistic approach, creating community schools, opening the schools up longer so we can have opportunities for parents and guardians to come in and have computer skills, have training, have a longer day for our children who need that extra support, or even enrichment programs. I mean, having a nurse is not a medical facility in our schools. We just built new schools, and we don't even have a nurse's suite in the school. So we need to have that with social workers, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you. Pastor Hathaway, I think you have a quick statement.
I can speak to education. Union Baptist Church has been in the Head Start business for 53 years. We have produced over 8,000 graduates out of our program, 3- and 4-year-old. They have advanced skills going into the public school system. But what we found was that by the time they got to 3rd grade, they start regressing because there wasn't supports. So I partnered with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, created Promise Heights. Through Promise Heights, we raised an extra $30 million to go into the schools in West Baltimore. Now what happened? It's just tragic. North Avenue has been a revolving door of principals. We've never had consistency of leadership in those schools. Something's wrong with North Avenue.
Well, this question comes from Tamika in our audience. She said, Dr. Sonia Santelises, superintendent for Baltimore City Schools, was given a pretty decent contract and salary. What will you do to hold her accountable as for the school's budget is concerned? Should she be required an annual evaluation and audit? I assume some of that is done, though. Okay, I'm so sorry. Dr. Sonia Santelises, superintendent for Baltimore City Schools, was given a decent salary and contract recently. How do you hold her accountable is the question from our audience.
Look, it's impossible to defend raising the salary of the person in charge of our schools when there's no heat or air conditioning, when you can't drink water from the water fountains. But here's the thing. She's not the only one. The city council gave themselves a raise. The mayor gave himself a raise. They're not here to answer your questions. And one of the reasons I'm trying to put some hard questions to all of us is because you guys deserve to hear answers. Now, again, I want to ask my colleagues, people of good faith, we all agree that education needs more money. You heard TJ say he's going to keep public safety the same. He's going to raise education. I just want to know how. How are you going to do it, Ms. Dixon? How are you going to do it, Mr. Smith?
Well, first of all, let me say this. We don't have the authority to legalize marijuana. So some of your proposals, we as a mayor don't have the authority to do. What we can do is work with the state. Secondly, when I agree to support the casinos, expansion of casinos, I'm not a gambler. For those that do it, that's great. But the reason why I did it was because all of that money was supposed to go into education, and that's not where it's going. And so first of all, I'm going to require that our city delegation work with the state to make sure that they bring the resources that we need to help to support that. That's what we elect them to do.
I don't know if we are texting in questions from the dais here, but if we're asking questions, I want to know who the woman was in the car. So we can get an answer to that tonight if we're asking each other questions. This wasn't his opportunity to ask us questions because we're here to answer the people's questions. I will be putting forth my education plan. I will be putting forth my education plan soon.
Where does does that come from? I don't know. In fairness,
I apologize, y'all. I can't keep sitting up here listening to this crap and not respond to it. But I'll be putting forth an education plan soon, and we know that there's a ton of money in this city from waste, fraud, and abuse. We know the city owns a ton of property, some of which can be sold. And I have said, and I'll say it again, no new funds to public safety at this point, and the new funds and revenue that we generate towards education for the city contribution.
Mr. Vignarajah, you can respond.
First of all, TJ, look, we're applying for the hardest job in America, and I get that some consultant told TJ to try to bring this issue back up. I get it. Let me be clear. I'm happy to answer it. The person was a friend of mine from DC who was here for a legal conference. We have provided her identity to lots of people, and we're going to respect her privacy. But I'm sorry. This is important. I asked a question about how you were going to pay for education. I asked a question about how you're going to make sure that public safety stays a priority. This effort to distract people from the fundamental challenges that face us is embarrassing, and TJ, you know better.
All right, Mr. Vignarajah, I still have a question for you. Mr. Vignarajah, I've got a question about transparency and the casinos. This is a question that came into us through the web. For Mr. Vignarajah, the rest of you can answer it as well. Does transparency exist regarding funds received from sources such as casino revenue? Because you brought that up a moment ago.
No, there is no transparency when it comes to where the money is coming from or where the money is going. Let's just take last week for an example. The comptroller admitted that she did not include $20,000 on a tax return that she filed in a business that she owns with Catherine Pugh. That $20,000 came from J.P. Grant. J.P. Grant was a donor and is in the middle of a federal criminal investigation, and he got lots of money on deals that the comptroller approved. We called for her resignation. The question is not why did we call it, the question is why did no one else?
Mr. Smith, you responded on our air. You said you didn't think it was your place to call for her resignation.
Well, first of all, the people of Baltimore actually have candidates for comptroller, so they can offer her resignation in April by voting for her opponent if that's what the public thinks. First, and secondly, due process is a thing. It exists. She needs to be held accountable for what she's done and proven that she's done something wrong. We've talked about it, that there are loopholes that exist, and people are skirting those loopholes. Yes, some of us hold ourselves to a different level of morals and ethical values where you're not going to slip into something like that. But some people operate where they can navigate through those loopholes, and that appears what's been done. No, transparency doesn't exist. This should be public-facing, and it should be fully disclosed. It's out there, but you have to seek it, unfortunately.
So do you think it should be, and all you should answer, do you think it should be illegal for city elected leaders not to be able to accept campaign contributions from people who and businesses who do business with the city?
If you're going to vote on those things, absolutely not. We should absolutely. We have campaign finance reform, but we haven't funded campaign finance reform, so you can't opt into public financing. So everyone still has to go out and solicit money from people, which includes people that are in business with the city and their current sitting elected officials.
Sheila, you want to go?
What I was going to say is that just based on the climate that has happened over the last 2 years, there's a lot of changes where businesses now who do business with the city don't want to contribute to campaigns, and that's a good thing. But we also have to look at other ways. 90% of the funds that I've received in this campaign has been grassroots from everyday people. I have not received money, very little money from anybody that does business. And if they do, then I will disclose that information on my disclosure, as well as our financial statements for Board of Election is public information that people look at every day. But so, yes, we need to disclose that if we receive it.
Okay, we've been, Mr. Vignarajah.
I think Mary asked a simple question and deserves a simple answer. The simple question is, should people be able to give money to politicians that then can vote to approve their business deals with Baltimore City? The answer is absolutely not.
Right, thank you.
All right. We have a graphic that we're going to show you now. This is our Fox 45 News Gonzalez poll. Should all Baltimore elected officials be replaced? Our respondents are saying 42% are saying yes, 45% are saying no, so that's pretty close. All right, now, we have reached the point in our Fox 45 town hall, ladies and gentlemen, I think we mentioned this to you, where the candidates running for mayor are going to get an opportunity to present their platforms.
And Mr. Smith, you're first, so we'll let you go.
Well, thank you all very much for being here tonight, and I get to test this out. First and foremost, I just want to offer my condolences to everyone who's lost someone. It's been a tough several years for us here. I have a great deal of respect for everyone who has put themselves in a position to do this and do what's in the best interest of the city. We don't agree on everything, and y'all can see that. But at the end of the day, we're in this to help Baltimore. So thank you. And a special shout out to Safe Streets in the building tonight. Thank you for what y'all are doing, and thank y'all for being out there in the communities. All right? So we got ourselves a college project, and we had to do this, and I'm just going to go over a few things, a few highlights of things that matter to me and are in my crime plan, but there's much more you can see at tjsmithforbaltimore.com. But just look at this map, where an overwhelming amount of the homicides take place in the 3-mile area. We see the violence occurring over and over in the same communities. It really doesn't move much. It's just the amount of violence that occurs in those same blocks, in those same communities, over and over again. I've put forth a plan to address just that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Establishing trauma go teams. This video here was taken on a street off of North Avenue. A man was killed in the overnight hours, and the fire department came out the next day and washed his blood down the drain. I went over and knocked on doors there just to ask the community, did anyone stop here besides a police detective, besides the news media, just to see if you're okay? And no one had done that. We don't have people going out responding to the trauma like this that we're seeing day after day in our communities. There could be a kid that's watching this and now playing pretend with his action figures or her action figures and acting like what they saw overnight. This is not normal. We can't normalize it. Under my plan, we're going to create trauma go teams that will respond to communities like this that are experiencing this violence, and they're going to go out to those communities and make sure people are connected to resources that can get young people, especially, the help that they need. But it's not just young people, it's older people. And I know some people in here have experienced trauma, and we're all dealing with it, and we should have opportunities to go through some sort of mental health. So focusing on the people and places that are most often associated with violent crime, it's more than necessary. We know where the crime is occurring. Cherry Hill's been doing a phenomenal job. Their Safe Streets, their Rich Project, everything they've done down there has made it so that they hadn't had a murder in a year. We had a murder 2 Sundays ago, and the following day, 2 men were shot and killed. That shouldn't happen. And that's a government responsibility to understand what retaliation looks like. We need to support the communities who are stepping up and doing exactly what we expect them to do, exactly what we want them to do. That's a community that's working. We need to support it. Disrupting the flow of the guns that are illegally coming into Baltimore. Baltimore police seized 1,900 guns last year. Do you feel any safer? That's a great amount of guns to be taken off the street. However, that's akin to taking one piece of crack off somebody on the corner. We have to go after the mid-level and upper-level gun dealers. These guns are coming in off of 95 and coming in off that port somewhere else and off the bus terminals. We have to go after those folks, and we need to have press conferences with 50 guns on the table and not one. We need to get more officers on the street, and we can do it by civilianizing a number of the administrative staff, and we need to put those officers in the areas from back at that earlier thing, and behind the walls programs. We know the recidivists. We know who you're likely to be. There's a 93% chance if you come home without a job, you're going to be back in jail in a few months. But there's also, there's a 93% chance that if you have a job, you won't go back. is a 70+% chance that if you don't have a job, in 4 months you'll be back in. If we know this, we can invest in this. I will work with the governor to get a robust program. I will be selfish because I will be asking for a Baltimore program for Baltimore zip codes, because we need our young men and women who are returning to have opportunity. And as I conclude, talking about government accountability, we talked about a lot of this from this evening, so I'm not going to go over it in great detail. The chief ethics officer, chief administrative officer measure the outcomes, a robust office of constituent services, and in the back room wheeling and dealing. We have to end it. We need to end it now. Workforce and squeegee, I'm running out of time.
Yeah, TJ, you're out of time. Sorry.
Right, thank y'all. Y'all can find more at tjsmith4baltimore.com.
All right.
Okay. Presentation.
It is not easy keeping this to 4 minutes, so we really appreciate the candidates trying to do that tonight. But as TJ said,
Mr. Smith,
they have 4 minutes.
We didn't mean to rush you.
But they all have campaign websites that you can go to for more.
Yes, we didn't mean to rush you. And Ms. Dixon, it's your turn. They're just assembling, I think, anything that you need. You have a PowerPoint? Yep. Okay.
There you go.
Advance it. Okay, there you go.
Right. So so we've been talking about budgets and how much we're spending for public safety, and I really wanted to give you some factual information that you can take with you. And it relates to crime and public safety spending in the city over the past few years. So if you look at this first slide, in 2017 operating budget versus in 2009 when I was mayor operating budget for Baltimore City, from 2007 to 2011, the city reduced its homicide rate by over 30%, and only increasing the Baltimore City Public Police Department's budget by an average of $1.4 million per year during the last period of time. The city had less homicides and closed to 3% less spending in the police department in 2009. So when we talk about where we're going to find money, it's talking about accountability. In 2017, when we witnessed over 342 murders, 100 more homicides with $1 million more spent, you can do the math and see. Baltimore City Police Department current resource level are relatively to the city's government operating budget in rates of inflation significantly greater than at any point over the last decade. These three things being the case, it seems is undeniable that the Baltimore City Police Department has the money to do its job properly back if you take 2017's budget funding level. But because of the increase of $17 million in 27, the budget for the police department has just ballooned and got out of control. Now we're going to look at overtime. People keep pushing this false narrative that Baltimore Police Department spending, overtime spending, went up during my administration, when in fact they both went down. WBAL and other news outlets, along with the Bureau of Budget, has shown that during my first elected term as mayor, I tightened the belt on spending for police overtime by 4%, which is still less than 3% that we are spending today, with greater results back then. Violent offenders, quality of life in our communities, not locking up people, but focusing on getting our guns off the street and dealing with quality of life. This chart clearly shows that under the O'Malley administration, we were spending upwards of almost $32 million a year in police overtime. During my first elected term, I dropped that spending by almost $14 million, and during my last term in office as mayor, I reduced that by another $1.2 million and has spent less in police overtime than any mayor over the past 20 years, spending less than 18% a year. As you can see by this graphic and information provided, you don't need to spend more on police to effectively tackle crime. What you need is an effective mayor who has a vision for the city and has a crime plan that every city agency and department head clearly understands the investment is investing fully. The third slide deals with leadership. Throughout my term as mayor, we had one police commissioner. We spent less on police overtime, and we had lower crime rate. In 2017, we were working with our fourth commissioner as crime began to rise. So that consistency was not there. During all of these changes, there were two things that remained the same: Jack Young was the city council president during the entire 5 years where we had a surge of crime. And Council President Brandon Scott was the chair of one of the committees tasked with addressing crime, the Public Safety Committee. And neither one of them had a plan to reduce crime until they started running for mayor. Ask yourself, is this what we need, this urgency with mayor? We reviewed a lot of statistics that have shown that crime, is this my time? Okay.
Yes, sorry.
All right, so you get my point. I would encourage you to go on my crime plan to see the holistic plan that we have in place now at DixonForBaltimore.com.
And we do have to say that Mayor Young and City Council President Brandon Scott have been invited to be here, and they chose not to.
All right,
I had to
Mr.
say.
Vignarajah, your turn.
You guys had fun tonight, huh? Can we start by thanking Pastor Greg and his staff for hosting us tonight? Thank you very much. You know, I'm the son of city school teachers. I went from public schools to Harvard Law School and came back to serve my city, to fight crime. Murders were even lower in 2011 and 2012 when they were below 200. And we did it because we had concrete solutions to the hardest problems facing Baltimore. That's what's defined our campaign. It's the reason we're doing so well. It's the reason our message is resonating all across the city, because we have actual answers to the hardest problems. And at through2020.com, you can see all of them arrayed: a 26-page crime plan, a 6-page plan on how to cut property taxes in half, answers on education and transit and everything else. But I want to start tonight, if it's okay, to understand why there is such mistrust in government today. You saw those numbers. Nobody believes that City Hall is going to deliver what they have said that they were going to do. And why is that? It's because city politicians over and over again have embarrassed our city, failed to deliver on their promises, and every time they get caught, they get a slap on the wrist. Ryan Dorsey, as TJ pointed out, got $42,000. He got caught. He gave the money back. Jack Young got money from JP Grant. He got caught. He gave the money back. Brandon Scott got money from JP Grant. He got caught. He gave the money back. Jack Young got more money from his homestead tax credit. He got caught. He gave the money back. Each and every time something happens, people believe you can get away with it. Well, we're the first campaign. We're the only campaign that was the first to call for Darryl D'Souza. We're the first campaign to call for Darryl D'Souza. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's right. And Darryl D'Souza is one of them. Darryl D'Souza, we were the only campaign that called for Darryl D'Souza's resignation. We were the only campaign to call for Catherine Pugh's resignation. We were the only campaign to ask for the donations to go back. And we're the only campaign, as I mentioned earlier, to ask for the comptroller to resign. Now, the reason for that is because we need actual accountability. We need to look hard at what's being done. We've pledged to you that we're going to do an audit when I'm in office. Well, I decided I wouldn't wait. I did an audit of the police overtime of the 8 police officers that were the center of the GTTF. We found out, and here's what you learn. You learn that these officers collected $1.2 million in police overtime over the course of their conspiracy. Can you imagine what we could have done with $1.2 million while they were defrauding the public and committing crimes? Some of them caught $40,000, $60,000, $80,000. It was happening underneath the nose of the current administration, and they did nothing. Well, here's the difference between our campaign and the status quo and everyone else. City politicians want to take credit. We want to take responsibility. If things don't get better, blame me. If the water bills are wrong, if the trash isn't getting picked up, if the potholes are not being fixed, blame me. If the murders are not going down, if the schools are not getting better, blame me. Because I know, as you do, that this city is magical. We have assets that are the envy of the world. We have a deep water port. We have an international airport. We have 2 great sports franchises. One is greater than the other right now. We have anchor institutions like the University of Maryland and Morgan State and Johns Hopkins. We have a rich, diverse history. We have this affluent suburb. We have a location between the political and financial capitals of the world. We know that this city's potential is just waiting to be unleashed. What does it need? It needs leadership. Through 2020, you're going to see exactly what leadership looks like. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
All right, Mr. Vigneraj, thank you. And Pastor Hathaway, who is not running for office, you get the last word, sir, tonight.
I'm so glad I work for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. What we've done, I've got some of my team out here. We've been talking to people. We've talked to over 2,000 people in the city of Baltimore. We're talking to people at a rate of 200 people a day. By the time we hit mid-April, it's our goal to have talked to 20,000 people in Baltimore City. If you want to talk about a crime plan, you've got to begin with the suggestions that come from people. And I think that what we've seen is that we've had so many people that act as if they're experts, but I'm here to tell you that each one of you are experts in your communities, in your neighborhoods, about how to deal with crime. So first, I want everyone here to go register at actnowbaltimore.com. We're going to build out a citizens' power base in this city that can hold people accountable, that can ensure that we have credibility, and ensure that we have transparency in government that will last for a long time. Just quickly. 85%. We talked to 2,000 people. That is their top concern. But I want to get to something. Because I think we're here where we want to have suggestions. The people in Baltimore are able to offer quality suggestions. Have any of you ever looked at, when you go to vote, you see something that is bonds. You have bond referendums and you pull the putt. Our city basically borrows about $50 million. We give it to the zoo, we give it to the aquarium, we do all of that. But if you want to understand anything about financing, the city of Baltimore could very well borrow $1 billion to invest in our neighborhoods and communities, and you know how they would pay for it? Pay for all of that police overtime, pay for all of those cases that they got to pay. That will pay off the bond, and we could put people back to work. We could take 10,000 houses and redo them if the city would be bold, go out and borrow the money, pay for it from the money that they already have, and put people back to work. Let me tell you one more thing. I am tired of hearing people demonize people who live in public housing. I've talked to people in public housing. They have ideas too. They did not realize that there is a law in place where you can have entrepreneurship in public housing. You can have businesses in public housing, and that the government should be monitoring that just like they monitor MBE, WE. There is an area called Section 3 of the 1968 Housing Act that says that people who live in public housing should be able to benefit from the dollars that come from HUD by businesses that they create. And no one ever talks about that. No one ever talks about the fact that this city is not enforcing and creating entrepreneurship in our public housing. We need to make certain that the next government, whoever it is, enforces Section 3. We want businesses in our public housing. Here's the other thing that is clear. Our Port of Baltimore is bursting at the seams with economics. I said before, there's over 50,000 cars a month that come through the Port of Baltimore. If you want to put young people to work and they have a love for washing cars, there's 50,000 cars coming through the Port of Baltimore every month. Every one of you pay dealer's preparation. Dealer's preparation is about $800 per car. I would take $10 per car, pay a person to go down there, help them with the mud flaps, help them with the mirrors, help them with the stripes, and put people back to work. All they need is to be able to get a tweet card so that they can go work at the harbor. Our harbor has more jobs than you can believe. Is my time up? I can keep preaching now.
You have 5 seconds.
I got 5 seconds? Let the church say amen.
Amen.
Pastor Hathaway, Ms. Dixon, Mr. Smith, Mr. Vigneraj, thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for being out here tonight. Before we go, closing thoughts, I would like to ask each of you, including you, Pastor Hathaway, and you can start in any order that you like, in 15 seconds, what can you give the audience that they can do over the next week, not next month, not once one of you gets into office, not of the current administration. What can the members of this audience do in the next week to help improve their own lives and the lives of their neighbors, the lives of the citizens of Baltimore? What can they do right now to help improve someone else's life or even their lives, the lives of their kids?
Register at actnowbaltimore.com and make certain that everybody in Baltimore City goes out to vote. Make sure that everybody goes out to vote. One of the things that is clear is that everybody is saying what is happening now, the people there, is not the way to go. We need a new direction, and the only way to do it is that we go vote.
Ms. Dixon?
And I would add, if you're not registered, you need to register to vote. Number 2, in order to keep a neighborhood clean, if there's trash in front of your front steps, pick it up, put it in the trash can, and also take care of that senior person in your neighborhood to make sure that they are being taken care of. Go to the store for them. Help them out in any way you can help them.
Mr. Smith?
Share your knowledge, be a mentor, join one of the groups that are going out there in the streets, whether it's Safe Streets, whether it's the men's groups that are going around, any of the groups, any of the advocacy groups, because you never know what your presence can do for a community or a person.
Find a young person who's either suffered trauma or has got so much promise that is waiting to be unlocked, and become their friend, become their mentor, listen to them, because not enough people in this city are listening to our children. That's what I would suggest.
And thank you.
Thank you all.
That is our town hall, your voice, your future. We thank you for watching at home, and we thank everyone. We have a full house here tonight. We also want to thank the Jerusalem Evangelical Lutheran Church for hosting us here tonight.
For Mary Bubala, I'm Kai Jackson. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you at the next Fox 45, Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall, City in Crisis. Stay with us. Stay engaged. Go online to foxbaltimore.com and also saveourcity.com.
Good night.